In this courageous conversation, I speak with Viknesvari. Viknes is a confidence mentor helping women to create inner stability so they can stay centered in spite of what's happening externally, and they can go from confusion to clarity on what's most important to them. I'm really excited to hear Viknes's views on courage and how to live courageously, and especially how do we show up with courage in our relationships. Such a juicy topic, and I can't wait to hear what Viknes has to share. Enjoy. Hi, Viknes. So great to have you with me today. How are you?
Hi, Moitza. I'm good. I'm so happy to be here. I'm really, really excited for our conversation today.
Yeah, me too. Me too. I so loved the chat that we have about a month or so ago. And it was really, really exciting. So I've been looking forward to it ever since. So Viknes, let's jump right in. And I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. Viknes, yeah. I heard myself say it wrong again. So that's us with our unconventional names, right? People always have trouble pronouncing my name as well. So
that's true.
I'm no stranger to that. Anyhow, so let's jump into talking about courage, my favorite topic. So when you think of courage, Viknes, what does it conjure up for you? What is courage for you?
Yeah, I was just thinking about this before we hopped into our call today, and what kind of came to me was actually about the experience of courage first. And for me, it's really about taking a deep breath and being in my body, and being in that space with kindness and compassion, and asking myself, how can I support myself in taking this next step forward? And sometimes it could be reaching out to get that support in something that I'm going to do next, and for me, that's the experience of being in the body, because I don't think in my mind, oh, I'm going to be courageous right now, right? It's how does it actually show up in my life? And then when I think about when I'm not being courageous, for me, it shows up as like hiding away or like avoiding, even though there's nothing like wrong with these behaviors, because it's like my survival coping strategy, right? I'm trying to keep myself safe. But I think the reflection then is preventing me from kind of coming out of my comfort zone, right? And I like to say the zone outside the comfort zone is like the magic zone where the magic happens, So it's like, yeah. So it's like, okay, then when I'm staying in that space where I'm kind of hiding away, then I'm not in my magic, I'm not expanding. That's what courage is to me.
Oh, Viknes, this feels so good in my body right now. Like my skin is tingling, and I'm like, yes, I love how you describe that magic zone. What a wonderful way to describe it, right? Usually we just say kind of stretch zone to stretch yourself, but yeah, it is a place where magic happens. I love it. And yeah, I really love this way of describing courage as feeling in your body. There's so much information that our bodies have to share with us in the moment, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's fascinating.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Yeah. So yeah, anyone that's watching this, next time you are in a position where you feel like you want to be courageous or you need to be courageous or whatever, it's a choice. Just notice how you feel in your body, right? Notice how that is in times where you are courageous and times where you may feel you're not and you'd like to be. It could be a really interesting exploration.
Yeah. And Martha, it's so interesting because I wanted to share with you that, the idea of courage also kind of came to me from Brene Brown. That's where it kind of started this whole journey. And I think she also breaks down the word in the Latin word, and it's all about, I think she says it in a quote, to speak one's mind by telling all of one's heart. And she talks about the heroic, courageous acts where you're putting your life online. And then she talks about how this courage is actually about putting vulnerability on the line, which I read that quote, I was like, wow, it's like so true. It's really taking that, and for me, it's really taking that courage or that step forward and being open and vulnerable, not just in things that we do for ourselves, but also with other people and in relationships, right? Because that is tough.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, I really subscribe to that definition of courage by Brene as well, where she says that, I guess in another way, that courage is the level to which we are willing to be vulnerable. I'm like, oh my God, like the way they measure courage in research, in social research, is the level to which you like vulnerability is actually a measure for courage. I'm like, wow, it's mind-blowing, the kind of mindset when you think of it, right? Because so often we associate vulnerability as weakness, and that's why it, I think, seems so often so hard to be vulnerable, because it's, oh, I'll be perceived as weak, and all whatever that kind of pulls, right, kind of comes with that in our heads. But it's so empowering to think, no, vulnerability is actually, it's quite bold, isn't it? It's to be willing to consciously, willingly be vulnerable. It's literally like putting your heart out there and like for the world to see, and still feel that you'll be okay and that it's important to do. Yeah.
And it can be scary, right? Like putting your heart there. I think what comes to mind now is like when I was younger, I used to have like walls around my heart to protect, because I don't want people to kind of know what I'm feeling or be judged by others, you know. And especially what you said, weakness, right? We think that expressing our emotions and our feelings to others is weak. So it was really a journey, I think, for me also, kind of taking down those walls and like learning that being who I am and showing the world who I am, or even in the conversation with someone, really being in touch with my emotions and expressing that is possible, it's safe to do so, and that in itself is courage, you know.
Absolutely. Oh my God, I really relate to that. And Viknes, actually, when we had our chat just over a month ago, what I loved was when you mentioned the courage, where it showed itself most in your life, maybe not most, but one area that it was really important for you to be courageous was relationships. Do you want to tell us more about that? Because I really relate to that. Courage in relationships.
So that was really interesting, because I was going through a period of dating this man, and it was a time when he had kind of gotten a little bit quiet, and I was kind of wondering what was going on in that relationship space. And I also had this belief in my mind where if I'm dating someone, then I'm loyal to that person. But actually, we're not even in a relationship yet, right? So I had to go through this process of releasing this relationship, doing a kind of detachment process, so that I could go on to a space of dating other men and multi-dating, seeing a few other men. And it took a lot of courage to put myself out there and do something completely new that I've never done before. Because before this period in my life, I have never dated any men. You know, they were all like friends whom I had interest in, but really going out there to meet people that I didn't know or had just known maybe online. We were having a couple of chats, and for me to take the initiative to say, oh, how about let's have a chat, you know? And for me, it was also a way, because I knew that in that moment, I would kind of know whether I can gel with the person. Is there a good vibe? Do I want to continue this relationship of getting to know phase? So what was also happening at this point in time was I was also taking a painting course. So I had at the edge of my bed this, I was learning to paint a woman's face. So she was sitting at the edge of my bed, and I went through this process of dating the men. So what kind of happened a couple of months later, as I was lying down, I looked up at this woman. She was very incomplete, you know, her eyes was hollow, so the background was showing through. Not very beautified, but what I realized was that she actually was looking at me with her eyes so big and so frontal, and she was so strong and like just there, confident. And I was like actually that was me. And I didn't know this a couple of months ago. And how I arrived to this conclusion was, as I went through the different men that I dated, right, I was reflecting, like, what was I learning about men? What was I learning about myself? What was I learning about this dating process? They also clarified what was important to me in a man. And as I kept showing up to meet different people, my confidence as a woman grew. You know, I was embracing my worth. So it took that period of time for me to realize that this woman on the painting, whom I painted a couple of months ago, was actually me. She's actually so confident, but it took me that journey of meeting all these people. You know, I'm getting a lot of goosebumps.
Yeah, me too.
Right?
Me too.
It took me a number of months to realize and come back and see this painting and see like, oh my gosh, this woman, this confident woman is actually me.
Yeah.
You know, and the interesting thing that then happened was I took the courage, or took the step in being vulnerable, right, to reconnect with this first man that I was dating, just to kind of see, you know, I mean, if he responds, great, let's see what happens. And if it doesn't, then I'm good to let the relationship go? And he responded, right? And since then, we're happily married. Right? But that was, I guess, the essence of, wow, really taking courage to do something that scares you, that's very different, it's never done before, and having support along the way of doing that, you know?
Yeah. Oh, I love that story, Viknes. It's amazing. And I'm thinking, right, when we do something that we're not used to, perhaps, like you said, oh, okay, the first thing I noticed, you were like, okay, I did the releasing. You think he said a releasing, either ritual or something, like to release this man. And I think there's huge courage in letting go, in just, or I call it as well, detaching.
Yeah.
Oh, it can be so scary because we feel often that when we grasp to things, we can control them and we can control the outcome and how it's going to pan out. But actually, there's so little that we can control, right? We can only control ourselves and our own response and our thoughts, for instance. But yeah, the letting go, I think, is in your stories that I recognize the first huge courageous thing.
And Moisa, you know, as you're saying this, you know, the thing that popped into my head was the word trust. Because we're talking about controlling, we want the universe, we want the past to kind of go in this way. But even today, the thing that I realized, even though we can't see what's going to happen, we don't know what's going to happen when we're in communication with other people, when we're taking risks. We just need to trust that everything is going to work out well. And it's tough.
Yeah, exactly. And I relate so much to your view of courage as being so key in relationships, because that's one area that I really saw that it's so important as well. And for me, it was the opening up, like you said, when you were aware or become aware at some point of these walls around your heart, right, of kind of this guarding, right, or armor, as Brene Brown calls it, isn't it?
Yeah.
The armor up. And for me, in my relationship, which is also a happy story, a story with a happy ending, if you will, like yours, but it took me being willingly vulnerable and you know, just asserting to myself that I am enough the way I am, and that it's okay to, basically, that there's no other way to have there's no real other way to have a real deep intimate relationship with someone unless I'm willing to be vulnerable. I think this was so huge for me because, like, what Brene Brown actually says as well is our vulnerability is what creates connection, and without vulnerability we can't connect. So it's, yeah, at some point it just, and I've a few times in these conversations that I had a few so far, is that we often come to the point of seeing, oh yeah, courage is that feeling about doing something that's so important, so much more important than what scares you. And to me, having that relationship grow and evolve and not just fall apart because I'm scared was so much more important. So that step to be vulnerable and just put my heart out there was worth it, basically, in my eyes, you know? Yeah.
And just hearing off from you, it's like, it's so true. It's like, I think it's also realizing that we are worth it to take that step forward and to go after, or to try and get what is it that's truly important to us, and to try. Yeah.
Exactly. And I'm wondering, when you did let go of the, I guess, attaching to the first relationship, right, with your now husband, and you went out to date, allowed yourself, I guess, to date other men, what was kind of the scary parts? What was the scary bits around it? Was there any other?
Yeah. So I think it was about finding, like, maybe the fear of not finding a good fit, or like, you know, and I kind of put a number to myself. So I said maybe like I will go on about 10 or 12 dates, you know, to kind of see whether I'll meet the one by then. So I guess it was really, it was a lot of mindset work. I had to tell myself that be open, you know, because I tend to be a bit like, my energy wise, it can be a bit closed. I don't really want to get to know you, but I had to be in that process to be open to find out about you, be totally curious, like, let's see where it goes. It doesn't need to be a relationship, it can be a friendship kind of thing. So I guess the fear was also not feeling enough, you know, maybe how much of me can I show this person, But at that point, there was also another part of me that was, I am who I am. There's nothing else or nobody else I can be, and it took courage to also show up as me. And the other thing was, in this dating process that came very strongly and also leads back to Brené Brown's work, right? There's a lot about boundaries. She's amazing. It came up to a lot of boundaries. So I had a lot of funny experiences of men, I guess, being in their own ways. It's fine for them, but for me, it wasn't comfortable for me. Like, even though I had communicated, okay, please do not smoke where I am. Like, maybe you can step out and smoke outside. And maybe the first time they do, but the second time they kind of forget. And for me, that's like a no-no, But it also takes courage to communicate that, this is my boundary. It's up to you to come along with it, follow it, or leave it.
Yeah. Oh, I love that, Viknes. Yeah, the courage to communicate openly. Huge. And it's that kind of assertiveness that is not aggressive in any way. It's just, this is how far I'm willing to go and how far I let other people to. I don't know if I'm explaining that well, but I think it's that assertiveness of owning what what our expectation is, and simply asking that for ourselves. Because if you don't say it, how are others are not going to guess, right? Or it's very unlikely they'll guess. So I love that. Yeah, courage to actually say it. I find that a lot in, working with clients, for example, right? Or even I notice it in myself that sometimes when I want something, if I don't actually say it, it's much less real for me. Like, if I don't, it's a way of owning what you want when you say it, isn't it? It's so powerful to voice it.
It is. And why I said that it went back to Brené Brown work is, for me, something that she said in her e-course with the book Gifts of Imperfection really drilled down for me about boundaries, because she said this thing about choosing discomfort over resentment, and like choosing 1 minute of discomfort from saying no rather than 6 months of resentment from saying yes. Right?
Oh, I love it.
Yeah. And I guess really, for our listeners, it's for us to communicate that to the people around us, especially our loved ones, that this is really my boundary. I can't do more than this. I can't take on more than this. And where are you going to meet me in the space that I've communicated that to you? And I think a lot of conversations that I've had, even with friends, or even for myself, it's learning to, how am I going to put the words together to actually say that? And the fear that comes out of how they're going to react. Are they going to be angry with me? Are they going to be confused why I'm putting this line and accent? So it's a lot about supporting myself through. And it takes a lot of courage in going through that process, right? And I'm realizing this as I'm speaking to you as well. So thank you.
Yeah, I love that, Viknes. And that's the thing, the courage. We need courage when there is fear involved. If we're not afraid, it's like we don't need the courage necessarily, right? The courage comes in when things are scary. And when you said you're supporting yourself for that, it leads me perfectly into the next question or next thing that I want to explore with you is, how do you manage to support yourself? How do you manage to be courageous when things are tough and scary? When you are in the midst of that, what do you do? I think that would be great for our listeners as well.
Yeah, I think one of the things I experience as someone who has high expectations of myself. So sometimes I go through these perceived failures, and the process, of course, in a simple terms, it looks like picking myself up, showing up, and then trying again to do the thing that I love the most. But what's happening underneath that is really, for me, it's the courage to be honest with myself, either through a meditation or journaling. So it's really listening to what my body has to say to me or what my heart wants to say to me, and those feelings that are inside there, and to do that, to create the space to do that, that's not judgmental or not wanting to change or fix it. So it's really trying to be with it and loving and accepting those feelings, because I think a lot of my past patterns in coping with emotions was a lot about pushing it away, ignoring it, just keep go, keep doing and overworking. So it's a lot about even slowing down and just, okay, what is happening in my body right now? What am I feeling? And what do I need? And can I give that to myself? And for me, it's defying the pace of life in a way, because life is going, right, going forward, and I have to stop and get tuned within. So that takes courage for me, and that's something that I practice. Yeah,
absolutely. I just wanna pause right there and emphasize that point of stopping in the moment when we are in fear. Just to recognize that we are in fear, that something is scary, like, okay, so we can consciously respond with courage, right? So we can remind ourselves, feel into the body, like you said, feel into your heart, or do the journaling to tap into what your subconscious might be communicating, or even your conscious mind, right? To get those things into the conscious awareness, I think is really powerful, because then the more aware we are of what's happening, the more choice we have in how we move forward, right? If you're not aware, then we just react out of our kind of autopilot, the way we've been conditioned, like you said, just as we've always done. And you can't, and we can't get anywhere new if we do the things we always done, right? Yeah.
And it's about being compassionate also, because like I started this practice of listening to my body and accepting the feedback from my body just in the last 2 weeks. I mean, I probably have done it in different ways, like sometimes ago. So this 2 weeks I was very focused. But even in these 2 weeks, there were times that I kind of went back to how I usually function in life. So then, how can we then be kind to ourselves as we are trying to change? Or I think even that, daring to be compassionate and kind to ourselves also takes a little bit of courage, or something that I've been exploring, quiet courage. It's not something people see, right? People don't see us doing this, and we don't talk about these little things that we are actually doing for ourselves. So I think for me, I feel like those are the moments of courage that are so important.
Yes. Yeah. Oh my God, Viknes, absolutely. It's really courage to live the way that's really supporting us, right? And defying, like you said, defying the outside world very often. And that's where it takes courage, because we're going against the grain in a way, right? No, I'm not going to criticize myself to motivate myself, because the world is communicating that that's the way to do it, to be harder on yourself, to be more productive. No, that doesn't really work, for example, right? So I'll bring compassion. How can I be kinder to myself to really support myself? I'm such an advocate of self-kindness and self-compassion. I practice it with my clients. I practice it with myself. And like you said, it's not always easy when we've been kind of trained or conditioned by environment that we should just run and be hard on ourselves. And it didn't escape me when you said earlier you have high standards for yourself, right? And that can come in, and I think high standards are brilliant. We want to do good work, but it is the distinction between high standards of what's my best and high standards of perfect, which is kind of unattainable, right? We're setting ourselves up for failure when we try to be perfect, and there's this obsession with perfection these days. And I'll identify, as the first as having quite a strong perfectionist within me, but that's how I identify it now. It's a part of me. It's not all of me. I don't have to act out of that. It's a choice, right? And when I'm less conscious, it might take over, and when I'm conscious, it might feel uncomfortable, but I can choose not to, and I think it's also and I love that you said that courage is those little actions that we take within ourselves, often very quietly, not announcing them to the world, but it takes so much courage to counter that habitual way of acting or being, right? And doing what we feel is right for us.
Yeah, and I love how you said, Martha, about that it's a part of us. It's not something that needs to be rejected or like changed or fixed. It's just to be embraced that, yes, I do have this part of myself. And as you were talking about this and failure, and I think what a recent insight that I have as well was how I had tied self-worth, to what I could achieve. And I think, all these were like childhood stuff, right? But even recently when I was writing posts to share my thoughts, and realizing that I had tied my worth to that when there's no engagement or feedback, but kind of realizing then I'm inherent worth, and I think even just to do self-reflection to that level of beyond awareness also takes courage, right? The unseen steps within.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think that's actually one of the biggest values probably of courage, to look at our wounded places and heal them, because it can be painful. So again, we need to be courageous to even face it because of what we think we might see. I think what we end up seeing is never as bad as what we fear we'll see. And
it's so interesting that you're bringing this up, because I'm just thinking about recent conversations that I've had with my husband, and we're talking about relationships, right? And sometimes he's like my most beautiful mirror. He sees me in my whatever I'm showing up in my shadow, and sometimes it's so hard to accept when he's communicating that back to me. It's like, no, no, I'm not being this way. What are you saying? And with him, then I'm learning, how can I give my space to actually not push against what he's saying or defend myself, but actually lean in and say, is there some truth to that? Is there some space in what I'm thinking that's not entirely true? Can there be some spaces of openness, and to tango in that in a conversation with your partner, or in any relationship? That takes courage as well.
Oh, totally, Viknes. I love you mentioned that. This is how I view life and relationships. I always say relationships are our teachers. Yeah. And when you said, and it actually brings me back to what you said at the very beginning, the courage is to be honest with ourselves. And that's a way of being honest with yourself, is like, okay, is there a part of me that is bringing that out in the other person? What is here for me to learn? Rather than just going blame. No, this is not the way, you should behave, or I don't want you to be this way, or right? Or basically it's coming down to, I want things to be different than they are, but not taking responsibility for contributing a part of it to that. Totally takes courage, because it opens us up to questioning what we think we know, I guess, to put it briefly. Oh, I feel this conversation could go really deep, and we need to have another conversation around this, Viknes, because I love your views on this, and I could really ask you so many more questions. We'll schedule another one on the topic of that. Relationships as teachers. I would love that. If you're up for that, of course, we can chat that afterwards. And now I guess I'd like to ask you, you shared, right, the tips and where the courage is important to you, and how you've recognized or realized your own courage in relationships and in doing different things. Is there a way you would kind of drill down, or do you have specific tips, any other tips that you could share with whoever's listening for living courageously? What would you share?
Yeah, actually, I want to share this quote again from our amazing Brené Brown that has just stuck with me through the years. So it says, you can be brave and afraid at the same time. That's when you'll feel most alive. All the work that you care about the most will make you feel like this. It's okay to be afraid. It does not mean you're not brave. Yeah, so I think for me, it's like, so no matter what we are feeling, no matter what we are experiencing, it's okay to stay in that safe space for a while if we choose to, right? You mentioned there's also a choice. So I guess really the last tip would really be about that, what kind of choices do we want to make in our life? And is this choice that I'm making, is this thing that I'm choosing, is it something that's important to me in my life? Is it something I want to prioritize? Do I need it now? Or what action do I want to take to do that? And sometimes action, I think, looks very big and like scary. It's like, how are you going to reach that outcome when you're here now? It seems almost impossible. But I think what I've learned through the painting process then is just take one small tiny step first. One small tiny step. And then when you're there, then you look at, okay, what's the next step? Then what's the next step moving forward? And then soon later, all through the days, as you take one step, you'll realize that you've traveled a journey already. and you're no longer where you were standing.
Oh, I love that. I love that. It's so true, isn't it? Taking those small steps and actually turning back and seeing, wow, how far you've come. I think so often we look ahead, oh my God, there's so much farther to go, but we fail to look back. Wow, I've come so far already.
Yeah.
That's really supporting. I love that, Viknes. Thank you so much. And I just want to say how amazing. I just want to, you reminded me of the painting that I wanted to mention before. When you did the painting and then you realized, wow, that's me, and how you only realize that after you've gone through the journey and we're kind of ready to see that was you. But it's so interesting how there's parts of us that know so much sooner than our conscious mind kind of catches up with, right? We have we have so much within us that we just need to kind of work to uncover.
Yeah, and as you said that, like I just felt my body at the back kind of just relax. It's so powerful. Yeah. This doesn't make sense to the logical mind, like you say, it's all the magic of the universe.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's our perhaps our inner wisdom knows what we are capable of being, becoming, achieving even. And I think when we tap into that heart, into that, when you said tapping into yourself, I think we can access that. And for me, that's one of the things that gives me courage as well, knowing that there is almost like a blueprint somewhere within that I can tap into and bring, tap into that part of me that can fuel my courage. It sounds quite esoteric, but it's hard to describe. It's hard to describe, but that's how it feels.
It's true. And I think, maybe it's hard to describe because everybody's experience is so different. And I think you're right. Perhaps we all have this blueprint within us, and the steps that we take forward. Sorry, I think I had some construction.
That's okay.
So it's about taking the steps forward, but that's unique and different to us.
Yeah. I love it. Viknes, thank you so much. I forgot to ask you if you want to share. Perhaps, I know you already shared, but if there's any other time or the same time in your life when you felt you were most courageous, when you look back in your life, when you were most courageous, what would that time be for you?
Wow. I think another moment in time for me was when I left my job, like a secure paying job, to actually teach singing. So that's not something people know much about me. So, and I had so much of feedback like, don't leave your secure paying job, or don't do something in the private line. How sustainable is it going to be? Are you sure you want to do this? And for me, I think the question in my mind was, I didn't want to look back at my life 5 years later and have any regrets. So I just try it out, and if it doesn't work out, I'll come back to the field again. So that was a huge leap of faith and courage.
I love that. Yeah, that's amazing, isn't it? And it's so interesting how there's so many mixed, conflicting messages coming. Are you sure? Oh no, it's a secure job. It's all these. I guess it's somehow often I find it internal doubts that are being mirrored and coming from outside, so you can really examine them. Right? So if you fail to notice them within, they come from outside.
Oh, that's so true, Moisa. I love that you said that. It's so true. And then it's about, I guess, really clarifying for ourselves what's important, what's really important to us now, and can we choose that?
Yeah, I love it. And I love that you said to live life with no regrets, because that's how we do it. I just recently posted a quote that I love by Bronnie Ware. She worked with in palliative. She thinks she was a palliative nurse. She worked with people on their deathbeds, and she wrote a book about the top 10 or top regrets of the dying people. And one of her quotes was, she said, all regrets come from a lack of courage. And I was like, to live a life without regrets, it takes courage. It's as simple and as difficult as that. And I was like, this is spot on. And sometimes we'll make mistakes, and I think it's important to accept that in advance as well. And it's life without regrets is not life without mistakes.
Right? And I love that you brought this quote in that just synchronizes with what I just shared. That's amazing.
Yeah, I love it. It really is beautiful. Viknes, thank you so much for the sharing. I really enjoyed our time together, and I'm sure people find it super inspiring and helpful as well. So thank you so much, and we should chat about our next talk on relationships as teachers.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Marcel, for inviting me and having this conversation. I really enjoyed it. Yeah.
Absolutely. My absolute pleasure. And I'll share in the video description where people can find out more about you. Awesome. Thank you. Bye, everyone.